Joining us now, the 1st District Republican Chairman, Herr. And Eric, great to have you with us.
John, it's great to be here this morning.
You are all over the advance. I know you were a potential candidate for chairman of the Virginia Republican Party. You withdrew last week to back John Whitbeck, who now was the prohibitive favorite to be chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. I thought last week's advance was one of the most enthusiastic I've seen in some time. How about you?
I do too, John. I think people came together. We're excited about these results we had in the nationwide elections. I think people were excited about Ed Gillespie's run. Even though he fell short, he surprised a lot of people, and it really demonstrated the power of the grassroots in Virginia and, frankly, around the country. And it shows that when Republicans run on conservative issues, they win.
Okay, so Eric Herr, Chairman Herr, having said that, we've now got this $1.1 trillion spending package being jammed through by Republican leadership, John Boehner, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Kathy McMorris Rogers of Washington, the usual suspects. No defunding of Obamacare, no defunding of amnesty, another $1 billion for migrant children, funding them. So how do you think the grassroots are to react to that?
I don't think people will be happy about it. I think the best you could say about it is it could have been worse. That said, there are some bright spots in it. One of the bright spots is they cut the EPA spending by about $60 million. And they put the schnitzel on this move by the EPA to take over every stream and every pond on every farm across the country and make them federal water. So I think those two things, I know to people in Virginia, especially in the northern neck, the folks that I know, that's a big issue, and I do appreciate that that's in the bill. They cut some funding to IRS, and they put some language in to prohibit the IRS from targeting the conservative groups like they did in the past, so I think that's a good thing. The fact that it's an appropriations bill, not a continuing resolution, is also a good thing. But that said, as you laid out, there's a lot of bad. There's some credit being claimed for cutting Amtrak by $90 million. I'm all for cuts, but we're still spending over $1 billion a year bailing out a failed industry year after year after year, and that's not conservative principles in action.
Okay, well, that's just funding a rail network in the United States. So, we can argue that one way or the other. That doesn't turn me on or off either way. I guess one other part of good news is they're not giving Vice President Joe Biden a raise.
Well, that is, and that shows some good judgment. I think a lot of the senior staff were also cut out of raises, along with some of the most senior military members. I'm not happy that the military pay raise is only 1%, and I haven't seen what's going on with health care, co-pays, and some of the other things that have snuck into previous budgets. So I'm kind of watching that. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but I still am concerned that we're not taking care of our men and women in uniform enough. I guess there was another bright spot on some of the VA funding to get some of these backlogs of disability claims moved through, and I think they also cut funding to some VA bonuses to some of these people who cook the books and left our veterans hanging out to dry.
Probably a good idea, no question about it. Susan Stimson, Bill Howe race, if you will. In that House district, Bill Howe, Speaker of the House, has a supermajority and being challenged by Susan Stimson. And so for a lot of us, we're kind of scratching our heads saying, well, Howell has been a pretty effective speaker. He just won another seat in South West Virginia. He held that seat. He's probably going to hold Comstock's seat. He's got 68 members. He's been a pretty solid conservative. Why the challenge?
Well, first of all, let me preface this, that now you're speaking with Eric Herr, guy who lives in Stafford and who's interested in this election. My Republican committee has taken no position, nor do we on races. So I'm speaking just as me on this issue. And so let me address the first piece is results are what matter. results and not excuses, and that ties into Boehner, and it ties into Speaker Howell. And you said a pretty good conservative doesn't shepherd through a $6 billion tax increase. So I don't know how that tax increase came about, but I was promised when I worked on the McDonald campaign, and we worked against a $5 billion transportation plan from Cree Deeds, and I stood on people's doors explaining why they needed to vote for McDonald and the Republican ticket to avoid this $5 billion tax increase that Cree Deeds planned. And instead, for all my trouble and for all my Republican voters, friends, we got a $6 billion tax increase. So that's not conservative principles in action. And then there's a lot of excuses about how we had to do it, and there always is. But frankly, the excuses don't matter. Only the results matter, and the results are not conservative results.
So your only beef then is the transportation package, the landmark package that Speaker Howell and others shepherded through the General Assembly, Bob McDonnell's bill. And the reality of this, though, Eric, is that many of us that live in the regions that are affected by the fact that we haven't had a transportation overhaul in 3 decades, were in favor of this. I mean, I'm a conservative. I was in favor of it because you got to fix the roads, and you couldn't find the dollars under the seat cushion. And I'll give you an example. I was for it. I had Admiral Halsey on my show back in January of 2013. I've still got the video of it, and he said right on the show, if you guys don't get your act together and fix those roads, I cannot recommend to Central Naval Command that another carrier be deployed to Norfolk because we can't move our troops. So we had to do something.
Well, and the do something is the excuse. And, John, there was another transportation bill that Speaker Howell was involved in a number of years ago that had an unconstitutional tax associated with it. Bob Marshall, thank God, filed a suit and got that overturned. But what they've refused to do is address the way we fund roads in Virginia. If you've ever been out to Martinsville, if you've ever been out to Culpeper, if you've been out to Warrenton, you see these beautiful beltways around these cities. Meanwhile, we're choked in Northern Virginia and the Tidewater area because they've refused to address the funding formula, and instead they've tried to fill a bucket with a sprinkler instead of a garden hose. So they sprinkle more money all around the state instead of putting the money where it belongs because they've refused to address that funding formula. And they could have done that when they had the governorship in both houses, but they didn't. And, they told us all along this was going to be a revenue-neutral bill, and I was foolish enough to believe them until the 11th hour when it finally was signed, and I was surprised that it wasn't because I believed it was going to be revenue-neutral, and they gave up on that.
Okay,
so I don't think that makes sense to me.
Okay,
I'll
so
disagree
Eric,
with you on that. I think they could have done it.
All right, so bottom line is you're not in an official capacity as the first district chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia, but as Eric Herr, Republican activist, if you will, conservative, what you're saying is you're backing the Susan Stimson effort to defeat Speaker Howell in that June primary. Is that my understanding?
I absolutely am. I believe Susan has the enthusiasm, the energy, and the experience to win that race. And I believe she has the courage and conviction to put the Republican principles into policy and law. And that's what really matters. It's great to win seats. That's a starting point, but it's a necessary but not sufficient action to get conservative principles and limited government in action. You had mentioned my only complaint was the transportation bill. I'm a big supporter of school choice. I think competition is the only way we really fix our school system instead of dumping more money on the state monopoly. Mm-hmm. And under the leadership of Speaker Howell, we failed to pass the Tebow bill, which just allowed homeschoolers to play sports. But the teachers lobby, the administrator lobby, saw that as a key piece of their monopoly, and they squashed it. And Republicans voted against it. Even though they sit and tell us at places like the Advance that they're in favor of school choice, but a simple bill to allow boys and girls to play sports in their local teams while they're being homeschooled was denied them because it was an assault on the public school monopoly on education.
Well, I'm in favor of that, no doubt. I'm in favor of the Tebow bill, but I guess, I'm looking at this, Eric, and there's a lot of great things that Speaker Howell has done, and he has been masterful in cobbling together a supermajority of conservatives in the House, and he stood firm against Medicaid expansion that I thought was his shining moment. So we'll see what plays out. I do say this, though. I had a chance to talk a little bit to former supervisor, former chairman Susan Stimson at the Advance, and she's definitely matured politically since her run for lieutenant governor. In just the 10 or 15 minutes I had to speak with her, I saw a different Susan Stimson than I saw in 2013 in the lieutenant governor's campaign. I don't think that is going to bode well for Speaker Howell. I'll say that much.
Well, good.
All right, we're out of time. We want to thank the chairman of the 1st District of the Republican Party of Virginia, Eric Herr, for being with us. Eric, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Have a great day, John.